Hi, this is Eliot, and I'm dressed as a crocus because spring is coming. And somewhere underneath the snow behind me is a little purple flower, approximately this color, petals. And it's going to be reaching up, maybe it already is through the light shining into the snow. It's going to be reaching up toward the sun because that's a tropism. Heliotropism is the tendency for growing things to, photosynthetic growing things, to reach up toward the sun. Now, spring is one of those times in the season, and you've heard me refer to other times and other seasons on these videos, where there's a kind of sense of obligatory cheeriness. And I myself get very cranky when I feel like I'm going to be compelled to be cheerful now because it's spring. So we're going to set that topic aside for a moment because the topic of tropisms is what I would like to discuss today. And while I'm discussing that, because it's really the theme of part 2 of the Valentine video, in which I promised to elaborate on some thoughts about sex. So here they are. Sex is a tropism. And I noticed this only a couple of days ago at a bus stop in Manhattan when a young woman started moving toward a young man, kind of unconsciously. They were both staring at their iPhones, like people do now. And I could see that out of the corner of her eye, she saw he had very beautiful hands when he took off his mitten to take out his Metro card. At least I noticed his beautiful hands. And I noticed her noticing him, and I noticed her kind of inching toward him. And as they got on the bus, I could see that her sleeve wanted to kind of rub up against the back of his now very wet nylon parka, because we were all standing in the sleet. And I thought, it's not like she's in love with him. It's a tropism. The way the crocus is going to be moving toward the sun is a tropism. The way the leaves are going to be reaching up toward the light is a tropism. And because we are meaning-making beings, we attribute so much meaning to these tropisms that we think we now have to get married and have babies and settle down and make commitments because there's this strong tropistic sense of attraction. And what I'd like to suggest today is that this thought crossed my mind right at that bus stop, that sexuality actually sometimes separates more people than it connects. And that's because sometimes people meet and they are very, very warmly and affectionately bonded. And they would make very, very good lifelong partners. But then you hear one of them say, oh, but there was no chemistry. So what does that mean? That means there was no tropistic pull, which suggested to each of the others that a spasm was in the offing. A spasm that could take 12 minutes or 22 minutes or an hour and 3 minutes or however long it takes to have an orgasm. And once that's had, does that necessarily mean that we have to make a big cinematic, poetic, great American romantic novel story out of the whole thing and wind up settling down with someone to whom devotion may be less apparent than custody and child support issues later because we chose someone out of tropistic appeal. So while that's a kind of a very negative attitude, and I realize that we can't just settle down with appropriate partners and then go have tropistic bondings with whoever we feel like it. A, we could get arrested, and B, our partners could be upset. The idea is that we have to, I think, become more aware of the lack of connection between sexual attraction and romance. These things are really, really not necessarily connected. In some cases, in lucky cases, they are, but not always. So I don't know what my conclusion is going to be about that, but I know that for me, I'm going to continue to feel cranky as spring approaches because everybody around me that I've had as a partner in lamentation all winter is now going to start cheering up, and I might start feeling kind of lonely. So my plan is to go inside and have a good cry, and then go outside and hug a tree, because I know from my gardening days of communing with plants that the trees are feeling very anxious about having to create all those leaves. So I'm going to go and have a good cry, and then hug a tree, and wish all the rest of you a happy spring. Thanks a lot.